Okay, so I'm going to put one out to you here. Have you ever had a situation where it feels like the narcissistic person keeps pulling you back in because they keep offering to clean up the mess of your life and you keep falling for it? That you feel like you think of yourself as a mess and like, oh, well, they're helping me out? Or does it even feel like they're making messes and coming in and cleaning them up? So let's take that on, because there's a form of really trauma bonding where trauma bonding can really mean that they come in, the narcissistic person comes in, makes a big mess, and offers to clean the whole mess up. So let's break that down. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. RAMANI. Welcome to this YouTube channel on narcissism. And please hit that subscribe button if you're new to us. So let's say I came into your house with a can of paint and I just spilled it and threw it at the walls and made a huge mess. And then I upended the furniture, I blocked up your sinks, I smashed your windows, and I sliced up your sofas. And then I came back and I offered to clean it up. Most of you would think, get the hell out of my house. You're the one who messed it up. I am calling the police. And yet, in narcissistic relationships, this is a classical trauma-bonded dynamic. The narcissistic person comes into your life, makes a mess of it, kind of offers to clean it up, and people let them come back in and say, sure, come help me clean up the mess that you made of my life. So how the hell does that work? Well, let's start with first. Sometimes that's where the narcissistic relationship can actually start. When we have talked about the different kinds of people who are often the more likely targets of narcissistic relationships, that can include people who have had a history of trauma or significant loss, or people who are going through a difficult or a transitional time. At those times, we feel messy and unsettled and almost like we need someone to clean things up for us, right? It's exactly the kind of situation a person with a narcissistic personality may try to exploit. They may sweep in and, as part of love bombing, may offer help or support, may give advice or guidance as they clean up our perceived messiness. They may tell us, oh, you're so lovable, despite whatever messes we are enduring. This is the stuff that would often happen early in a relationship. And while it is dangerous because it sets up a dynamic of them as the savior and the other person in the relationship as in need of saving, this other dynamic I'm about to talk about is a much bigger problem. Psychologically speaking, a narcissistic person is a one-person wrecking crew. They slowly dismantle us and often prey upon people who have their own attachment issues. So when the narcissistic person who is manipulative comes into contact with someone who has, let's say, an anxious attachment style, that becomes a recipe for a trauma-bonded catastrophe. The cycle of love bomb, calm, chaos, break up, get back together, calm, chaos, break up, get back together. That's a classical trauma-bonded cycle and a classical sort of anxious attachment cycle. But with each one of those cycles, you are being increasingly invalidated, gaslighted, manipulated, and end up feeling more and more confused, helpless, self-blaming, self-doubting, anxious, and upside down. You basically feel like a mess, right? And that works beautifully for the narcissistic person because you look externally like the messier one. They are actually soothed by you being off balance, and they can become quite calm and composed under those conditions, and may even appear to be soothing you. Oh, babe, I know you're going through a hard time. I got you. You just got to do some work on yourself. So then, in response to that, now you go into therapy because you're the one who is the mess, right? And they are soothing you. But it was a mess that this relationship made. Lots of people will say, you know what? I was actually doing okay in my life when I met this narcissistic person. Sure, I had my demons and my wounds, but I was doing fine. I thought I met this person. We had a good thing. It was fun. They were smart or sexy or compelling or whatever charismatic, scrumptious, narcissistic thing they were. And then, as they do, around the 2-month mark, The cracks slowly appear, the red flags, you justify, the usual drill. As more time passes, you are really confused. The good day, bad day cycle begins. You justify, you rationalize, you want it to work. You doubt yourself, you become anxious, you doubt reality, you start feeling messy, helpless, and powerless. And then the narcissist may say things like, "Damn, your anxiety is really stressing me out." Or you may find yourself feeling more and more suspicious and feel like a private eye staking out their social media or watching their rhythms because something about them feels shady and you feel like you're losing your mind. Or you find that you get so preoccupied and that gets in the way of work or school. And you start getting more and more isolated because you're getting lost in the vortex of the relationship, and that gets dangerous because what might be happening now is you're getting pulled away from your supports, which is the only thing stopping you from being gaslighted. As you start feeling messier, it becomes easier for the narcissistic person to sort of play with you, cat and mouse style, to hoover you. You start to believe that, oh, this is my person and I'm the one who's a mess, and that you have to make it work. You bargain with yourself. You focus on the idea that someone else is going to get them who's not looking at as sort of anxious as you, and that you're thinking, oh, I'm always going to be alone because I'm such a mess. And so when they do hoover, or perhaps as it feels like they're slipping away or you're in the discard phase, you may even start leaning into your identity as a mess. And aren't they wonderful for staying with you? And it's like they are doing you a favor by staying with you despite your so-called neurosis and your anxiety and your bad memory and your emotion or your drama. They make messes, then they sweep in and pretend to clean them up, and you believe that they are doing right by you. By understanding narcissistic abuse and what it does to you, you can identify this pattern. That you are the one who feels like the weak one, the messed up one, and that you run the trauma-bonded risk of subjugating yourself to needing to be rescued and allowing them back in to clean up the mess that they made. This doesn't only happen in intimate relationships. Families can do this too. Bring you into bad schemes or plans, invalidate, gaslight, manipulate, and confuse. You feel completely upside down, and then they come in and offer to fix it. The therapy world can play into this as well. Narcissistic folks can actually present really calmly and look really well put together in couples therapy. The charming narcissist sitting next to the rather upset, anxious, and wide-eyed other non-narcissistic person, unless the therapist knows what they are looking at, it can be easily framed as, well, let's work on this messy person's anxiety and get this relationship tidied up. That idea of fixing the other person, the survivor of the narcissistic abuse, and never addressing the manipulation and the personality of the person making the mess is a real problem that can occur in couples therapy. In a way, it's like an arsonist who sets a fire so he can pretend to be the hero and put it out. They're making a mess so they can be the fixer. Be aware of red flags and of what narcissistic abuse does to us, how it impairs our judgment, how it's not you, really it's them. And the worst thing you can do is allow the fixer to be the very one who broke it. You aren't broken after these relationships. You're confused. And I must say that if you understand narcissistic abuse, it's a big first step to unconfusing you. You aren't damaged after these relationships. Again, you're merely confused. And this is always worse if the confusion plays on your core wounds. But pay attention to this dynamic. Narcissistic abuse happens. You feel confused and anxious and self-doubting and self-blaming. You feel messy. And then the narcissistic person, especially during the hoover, comes in and says, oh, let me take care of you. It seems like you're going through a tough time. In essence, they're offering to clean up your mess. But it's not your mess. It's a mess they created. And they're playing upon this diminished version of yourself, the loss of self-esteem that all survivors go through. If they made the mess, you'll clean it up. but please don't let them in to pretend to clean up the mess, because they're just going to make it worse. Thanks again.